This community, what's up, what's up? This video is long overdue and I blame Project 25. I do. And it's because, I mean, psychological warfare is a long standing feature of Euro American colonial rule. So the tactic of overwhelming the public with nonstop crisis isn't new, but in this moment, it's working on us in ways I don't think we have fully taken the time to reflect upon. So, as someone who is a deep processor, but also busy as a social entrepreneur and balancing full time work, I felt the impact personally. I'll start breaking down one major issue, and before I can even finish, another headline or cultural flashpoint demands our attention. That cycle is by design, but for me, it feels like by the time I get to it, it's old news. However, we cannot afford to have that framework. So in this video, I do want to slow things down and focus on the Essence Fest and warnings raised by India Arie in 2023. And I'm using that as a backdrop to highlight a painful pattern that in our community we've been taught to prioritize essentially the wrong voices. So let's pause, reflect, and apply a loving lens to how we discuss, interpret, and respond to the forces shaping Black American life. We owe India Arie an apology, y'all. In 2023, she clocked Essence Fest leadership before most of us even realized what was happening. She saw a shift, a divestment from Black American womanhood, our values, and our dignity. Right at a festival that was created for us, by us, and rooted in Black American women's cultural leadership since 1995. Peace and welcome to A Loving Lens, where we affirm Black culture through nuanced cultural critique. My name is Ayin Taliba. I am an interdisciplinary social scientist, and on this channel, we are dedicated to honoring the unique legacy of Black folk in America while addressing the distortions that threaten it. Y'all, we owe India Arie an apology. In this video, I want to discuss how instead of high-level conversations about cultural sovereignty, India Arie's critique at the 2023, or rather on the 2023 Essence Fest, got swallowed up by Megan Thee Stallion stans, who are Gen Zers and non-Black Americans. At least that's what I witnessed. Folks with no deep connection to Black American culture turned her observation into a spectacle. I'm talking memes, baseless clapbacks, performative think pieces, saying that her song about brown skin made her a pick me and that she was jealous of the very famous white biracial Alicia Still a Black Man Keys. And because of all of that literal nonsense, that literal noise and falsehood to demean, degrade, and attack this sister for naming what she was observing, we missed a moment for serious dialogue. Essence Fest was never supposed to be a space where people who do not belong to Black America debated whether raunchy rappers calling themselves whores and other women bitchs belonged on a stage in front of intergenerational Black families at a family oriented celebration is appropriate or not. That was never up for a discussion, and Essence Fest was never the platform for other people to critique and undermine Black American women integrity, culture, and our dignity. Essence Fest was created as a sanctuary, a space centering Black American women, our dignity again, our joy, and our cultural production. Black Americans have rules of engagement that other ethnic groups, even Black ones, essentially have permission to not respect when relocating to the US. Right. So I use the cultural iceberg when I teach people what culture means, or rather provide examples of what culture is after providing a definition. On the surface, people often see food, music, fashion, things that are is easy to engage with. But beneath the surface is the bulk of a culture. Values, social norms like Southern hospitality, which is under attack. No, bless your heart does not mean F you. I don't know what non-Southerner or non-Black American. That's it's so much more nuanced and complex. Anyway, I have a side tangent about that and I'll do a separate video on it. But The way we raise our families, what we protect, and what we consider sacred, such as HBCUs. We value education. Humor is a part of culture. Black folk created stand up comedy, the dozens. All of this is a part of culture. So, Essence Fest was a part of this iceberg, a living institution that reflected our priorities as Black American women. Culture includes history, and as Black women, our biggest asset being our body is pretty antithetical to the history of Black American women identity because we were reduced to literal sexual objects during the nearly 250-year long chattel enslavement of our ancestors. And I think it's important to recognize that we have been enslaved longer in this country than we have been free, and therefore the remnants are still very much present. Now in 2025, the consequences are crystal clear. When we do not guard our cultural boundaries, our future gets hijacked. First, let's situate India Arie as the star that she is. She has 4 Grammy wins and has been nominated 23 times. Won 2 BET Awards when it was valuable, 4 NAACP Image Awards, and has been nominated for 5 Soul Train Music Awards, and I'm sure there is much, much, much more. I have everything I need. I have everything I need to proceed and succeed. I have everything I need. When I tell y'all, these young, dumbs, and culturally disconnected people were doing cognitive cartwheeling to try to convince themselves that India Arie's brown skin was an example of her being a pygmy, but not Megan Thee Stallion, who we'll get into that later.
Rock that dick like a horse seat. He said, "Are you tired? How to look back like boy?" Hey, 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 hey. Let's have sex, huh? Wanna see your body, take your clothes off, huh? I'ma buzz quick if your lips off, huh? Rock that shit till you blessed off, hey. Yeah, let's have sex, huh?
Anyway, India Arie was really saying that this isn't about shaming sexuality. Black women can be sexy, sensual, and powerful. And for me, I think that this is possible without mimicking sex worker attire and sex worker priorities, which is male pleasure. And that's not even the problem that India Ari was discussing. And this is what I mean by being able to have higher level conversations that a lot of stands cannot because they're sheep. That's stan culture. And like the issue is who controls the narrative. When Essence Fest was Black American owned, programming reflected our community's wholeness and wholesomeness because people swear Black Americans aren't wholesome. It reflected our joy, our dignity, and our complexity. But as ownership shifted from our community, the festival's programming also shifted. This part is nuanced because it reveals the unique symbiotic relationship Black Americans have with our white American oppressors. White Americans have a reference point for Black America at our best and our worst because of them and in spite of them, right? Whereas immigrants, however, don't have that full picture. They've only been fed the worst stereotypes of us for the past 35 years, largely exported through media, criminality, hypersexuality, like Meg, and dysfunction. And they use rap music as the unique vehicle to do that. It's unique because it relies on Black youth to promote these images and stereotypes that are closely linked with the narratives used to justify our enslavement, right? That's why even though Essence was, or excuse me, that's why even though Essence, when it was owned by white led corporations like Times from 2005 onward, there was still an accountability. They were, I would say, beholden to Black American stakeholders. But when Richelieu Dennis, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but this Dennis guy and Essence Ventures LLC took over with the leadership from Africans like Carolyn Wanga of Kenya and other diasporic figures from Nigeria. Something new happened. I'm going to read from the screenshot from the Business Insider article. On June 28, 2020, a group of Black women using the name Black Female Anonymous published a damning public letter that shook Essence Magazine, the leading publication for Black women in America, to the core. The Essence brand the Essence brand promise is fraudulent. The essay published on Medium claimed the once exalted media brand dedicated to Black women has been hijacked by cultural and corporate greed and an unhinged abuse of power. The letter said that leaders at Essence fostered an extremely unhealthy work culture, rife with pay inequity, sexual harassment, corporate bullying, intimidation, colorism, and classism. One that began when the dentist dude, the beauty mogul behind Shea Moisture, bought the publication in 2018. They didn't just manage the brand, they actively removed Black American ownership and influence from our own creation. Having called their business Essence Ventures, for me, is intentionally done to manipulate Black people by exploiting an established brand and a trusted brand. And I just have to name that with the lie circulating that Americans do not have a culture. I'm always surprised why folks can't originate their own stuff. They copy, steal, or wait, what? What does Beyonce routinely call it? Oh, and they're inspired by us, but it's like, nah, you just take it from us.
Why? Because we gonna take everything. Yeah, but everybody does that though. No, everybody does. Yeah, you know. But it is gonna be first. But we go and meet everybody, say, hey, great show, and then still it.
Y'all divest from celebrity worship. Anyway, with that shift, Essence Fest became something else entirely. Suddenly, I'm finding from what audience members were saying, this is not from India Arie, but I'm finding from what attendees were saying that they were forced to see ourselves through the eyes of foreigners who often hold distorted stereotypes of us. That's how we ended up with an intergenerational family festival where decision makers didn't think twice about booking the self proclaimed whore and female chauvinist Megan Thee Stallion, not because of her talent, but because they believe the caricature of Black American womanhood is raunchy, ratchet, hypersexual scoundrels. And they thought she would be appreciated maybe at a strip club, but not around the elders and children. And I think for me, it's interesting because when I think of these folks from the continent, Kenya, Nigeria, Liberia, I'm like, would this be appropriate among y'all elders and your children? And the answer is no. Yet they think so little of us that they're like, oh, but it's okay with y'all because y'all don't have any standards or ethics or decorum, or there isn't a sense of there's a when and where to do what. And that is simply untrue. This brings me to Pan Africanism. Pan Africanism was supposed to be about solidarity, a two-way street where Black people across the diaspora supported one another's liberation. But for Black Americans, it has become a one-way street that's oftentimes weaponized against us when we aim to create some cultural boundary. And yes, shout out to Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican who gave us the framework of Pan Africanism. However, it was only until he experienced race in America, he became racialized in America, and so that's why Pan Africanism ethos is associated with a Black American context and not Jamaica. Anywho, we extend our arms, our platforms, and our hard won institutions to the diaspora at large. Yet, when it's time for reciprocity or reverence or just respect, many of those same groups exploit us and exploit the opportunities that they know that there is here, replace us or diminish us. And we experienced that in real time, July 2025, at Essence Festival, the 30th annual Essence Festival in New Orleans. It is not sustainable for us to keep being the open door of the diaspora while our own cultural infrastructures get taken over, rebranded, and sold back to us in distorted forms. What does it mean when the very festival that was founded to celebrate us is now curated by people who don't even respect our family values or cultural standards? As a millennial, I remember the pivot. Music videos went from Missy and the Brat fighting robots in outer space to soft porn on BET Uncut, and this is the consequence of it. I remember the moment when the message became, if you can't beat men's commitment to degrading you, join them. If you can't beat them, join them, right? And so many of black women did. We've joined in our own demise. That's social learning theory. When a behavior is rewarded and repeated enough, it becomes aspirational. Megan Thee Stallion's very name traces back to being sexualized at 14 years old by an older man who called her a stallion. A male horse, mind you. She communicates that she was uncomfortable at first, which is an appropriate response, but eventually adopted it as her brand. Then she goes on to align herself with the same misogynistic rappers who normalized her exploitation and sexual objectification as a teenager. That's cognitive dissonance in real time. Reconciling the discomfort of objectification by turning it into a badge of empowerment. And Black American women culture has been morphed into just that. Mind you, that many of the faces of early raunchy, ratchet rap music were not Black American women. I'm talking Lil' Kim, Foxy Brown, Trina. Those are not Black American women. But anyway, the bigger, like, okay, this is bigger than one artist or one performance. It's really about values. When historical Black spaces no longer reflect Black American values, we risk cultural genocide. When our narrative gets hijacked by corporate scripts and stand culture PR, we lose opportunity for self definition, right? To define ourselves for ourselves. And PR stands for public relation. It's like a moral panic versus manufactured consent. Fan cultures and PR cycles can frame valid critiques as quote unquote hate to maintain the status quo, and we know the Hive brand has been really instrumental in leading that discourse that silence and suppresses anything that challenges the brand's opportunity to build wealth off of whatever exploitation. So why now? I mentioned that I'm late on this video, but the information is still relevant. That's why we should not look at these things as, oh, that's old news, because it's still relevant and it's still having impact, especially if we do not make the necessary adjustments in real time. And I think if we do not reclaim our spaces like Essence Fest, our art, our stories, then we hand them over to people who do not care about our humanity, y'all. Because a lot of our African sisters and brothers and Caribbean sisters and brothers are hyper capitalists. This isn't nostalgia. It's about cultural survival and acknowledge and hopefully circumventing the trend where Africans know we value and have a need for spaces exclusively for us. They often have the capital and go on to exploit that need in ways that enrich them. And that is not solidarity. That is not Pan Africanism. India Arie stood on integrity when it wasn't popular. Mind you, we have a culture where people probably use the word petty to describe themselves before they would use the word integrity. And whether you agree with her or not, she reminded us that dignity and respect are non-negotiable. And I want to lift up that dignity and respect are the words that make up the acronym DAP. Black American hand greetings suggest that gesture is cultural, right? And if we were to give more attention to our cultural norms, we would see these values embedded in them and stop using the phrase respectability politics as if it's a curse, because people confuse and conflate that. If we let our practices and values slip, we end up celebrating our own erasure. And I fear that that is where we're at now, with people able to profit off of it and use relics and symbols of Black American culture to suggest that they have a political stance that they don't actually have, and it's all just to profit off of. And truthfully, that's what rap music has been doing for the past 25 to 30 years, y'all. We deserve more, we deserve better. And if we really care about black people and our culture, it starts with guarding our boundaries and honoring the legacy of those who use their anointing, their voice to raise our collective consciousness, not just talk about how good they are at pleasing men next in the other chick. Now, the social scientist in me is like, we can do a lyrical comparative analysis on India Arie's music and Megan Thee Stallion and think about the collective social cultural impact that is being made. And I'm not talking about intellectuals using their education to ascribe analysis onto celebrities that does not exist as a way to build proximity to social capital. I'm talking about a legitimate, rigorous analysis. Granted, this is not what India Arie said, wanted, or suggested. I'm just saying, as a consumer, we do not have to act like everything has the same impact, and that because it's a Creole woman or a black woman, it's inherently automatically positive and empowering. Like, that's not practical. It's not honest. I don't. Yeah, we have like a lot of self deception that I think is a part of our colonized minds, and it's really messing us up, man. Anywho, you can tell that we are backwards because based on who we defend and protect and who we attack. Again, these people attack the India Arie, and in order to protect and lift up something that, if again throughout this video, if we're looking at cultural analysis, it wasn't appropriate. And black Americans have standards and decorum and culture, and we value and respect our elders. And this attempt to make black women synonymous with sex worker is an echo to our enslavement, and it is truly a shame. Anyway, at a loving lens, we reflect deeply because rushing through culture is how we woke up with abortion rights stripped, stripper culture marketed as feminism, and a genre like hip hop weaponized against the very people who birthed it, the very community who birthed it. So, with that in mind, let's be more mindful of who we support. Let's honor the women who stand in dignity even when it is unpopular, especially then. And let's not confuse noise for substance. This is vital because throughout the duration of this administration, over 300,000 black women have been systematically removed from their positions. It's a direct attack on black women. But we have not fortified a culture where we defend and protect black women in this regard. However, if a stripper falls from a pole, she would be protected and celebrated. I mean, violence on the job or getting hurt on the job is problematic, but I just think about the populations of black women whom we have designated as worth protecting, and it directly aligns with upholding the status quo. Mind you, that even though your brand can be built off of quote unquote desirability and being sexually available, like Megan, we saw that when she was a victim of gun violence, people didn't care. So people wanting to have schmecks with you does not translate to them valuing you, and it's imperative that black girls and generations of black girls going into black womanhood know and learn that. We will defend a Cardi B. We will defend Megan and people whom are not contributing substance that is needed and necessary for our collective well-being, our economic mobility, and collective liberation. Let's talk about what real respect looks like for black women in all industries, of course, in music, and really think about whom we are trained to defend and whom we turn a blind eye to when they are in need of defense and support. I argue that if we were defensive of the right people, that would have translated to us being defensive over our cultural institutions like Essence Fest. But we couldn't get there in 2023 because you all made the focus on prioritizing again people whose work and works hurt their contribution is not really for the greater good. And 2 years later, now the very cultural institution that was our resting place may no longer exist. And our inability to have focused conversations and priorities that are serious is going to cause us to have more instances of erasure and ultimately cultural genocide. Drop your comments below. The impact that India Arie's music has had on you, and just any commentary that moved you from this topic. Peace. Thank you for listening.